Hi, welcome to the section of HDFS Commands. In this section, we'll see how to operate each of the HDFS commands on Hadoop distributed file system. Okay, so let me first differentiate a command which is of local file system, and let me differentiate that with an HDFS command. For example, if I wanted to list list files in local file system, I do something like ls-ltr, right? This is my command to list files or directories present in my local file system. Okay, so when I had to list files or directories in Hadoop, what I do is I do something called Hadoop fs-ls. So for every command in Hadoop, we could see there is something called Hadoop space fs, which signifies that it's an Hadoop file system command. Hadoop space fs. Fs is nothing but file system, and space hyphen and your actual command. Okay. So now that we are operating, or we are trying to list all the files and directories present in HDFS, when I press enter, I get all the files in my HDFS. So the major difference is, when you wanted to list files or directories in your local file system, you use something called ls-ltr, right? So in order to list any files or directories in HDFS, we use something called Hadoop space -ls. So important thing to remember over here is you use something called Hadoop space fs for all the commands in Hadoop. Yeah. So let's look at another command called cat command, and how do we use it in Hadoop. For example, I have something called piginput4.txt in my HDFS, right? So when looking at the contents of, in order to look the contents of this piginput4.txt, the command what I can use is Hadoop space fs hyphen cat and my file name. Yeah, it would display the contents that are present in that piginput4.txt. So if these are my contents, I can simply cat the contents, and you are already aware that cat is a command of Linux. But in order to use that in Hadoop, I use something called Hadoop space fs and the file name. It would cat me the contents of input4.txt, piginput4.txt. Right. So let's see how to create a directory in HDFS. So for creating a directory in HDFS, we use something called Hadoop space fs hyphen mkdir. If I wanted to create a new directory under this path, user training, right? Hadoop training. If Hadoop training is my directory which I had to create, I'll just use something called Hadoop space hyphen mkdir user training Hadoop training. So if I wanted to list the contents of it, I can simply use Hadoop space fs hyphen ls and the directory name. Of course, there are no contents inside a directory which we had created now, so it would list me no files. So if I wanted to copy this piginput4.txt from user training path to Hadoop Hadoop training path, so what I can do is Hadoop space fs hyphen cp. So I wanted to copy actually. So what I can do is space cp this particular file name space the new directory which we had created now. So yes, my copy is done. So let's try to list the contents of Hadoop training path once again. So you'll have a new file called piginput4.txt which we had copied from user training path. So cp is the command which can be used to copy the contents from one path to another path in HDFS, right? So let's look at how to remove a file in HDFS. If you could see here, I have something called this teja.txt, right? If I wanted to remove that particular file, how do I do that? I'll simply use Hadoop space fs hyphen rm, which is my remove command, and the file name. So that would remove the file that which is nothing but user training teja.txt. So my file got deleted. Yeah. So if I wanted to remove a directory, let's try to delete the new directory which we had created. Simple rm command and the directory. If I issue this particular command, I will be thrown an error stating that user training Hadoop training is an directory which cannot be deleted. Yeah, because it has some contents in it, right? So in order to delete a directory in HDFS, I would use something like this, rmr. This command will recursive delete whatever it might be there in my directory. So it will be able to delete Hadoop training directory as well when you had used something called recursive option. Yeah. Till now we have seen how to list files or directories in Hadoop, right? And we have seen how to cat the contents in HDFS, how to copy file from one path to another path in HDFS, how to remove a file, and how to remove a directory. Okay. Now that I have a file called, let me say that I have something called piginput4.txt. Okay. Let me recreate this particular directory once again. Yeah. Now, I don't want this piginput4.txt. I don't want this piginput4.txt in user training path. Rather, I want this particular file to be present in user training Hadoop training path. So, in order to do that, what I'll have to do is Hadoop fs -mv, the file name and the new path name. So, when I type enter, it will move the file, right, from your user training path to your user training Hadoop training path. Let's try to list if this file is present in user training path. Let's try this. You should get an error that there is no such file or directory. Rather, if you can try it in this new path, it should be present over here. I got my file into this Hadoop training, user training Hadoop training path. So that's the command to move a file from one directory to another directory. Yeah. Now, in order to view the contents, we know that there is something called -cat command to view the contents. Now let's see how to create a 0-byte file in Hadoop in HDFS. Okay. So Hadoop, we know that in Linux we use something called touch command to create a file in normal Linux or local file system. In order to do that in Hadoop, I will use something called Hadoop space fs hyphen touch z and user training. Let's name the file as okay, I will create a 0-byte file in Hadoop training path so that you can easily recognize that. 0-byte file.txt. Yeah. So I'm trying to create that 0-byte file in user training Hadoop training path. So let's list and see if I got a 0-byte file or not. Yes, of course I got my 0-byte file in which is in user training Hadoop training path. Yeah. So let's see how to get the disk usage of a particular directory. Like I said, we have something called du command which will give you the disk usage of a particular file or directory. If I wanted that for user training Hadoop training path, I get something called like this, like 55 bytes for this particular file and 0 bytes for our 0-byte file.txt. But if you wanted a summary of total summary of this particular directory, I use something called -dus, which will give me disk usage summary. Rather than giving all the entries with the individual file size, I would give something called dus, which would give me a summary of all the files or the size of all the files that are present in that directory. Yeah, that's it for this video. In our next video, we'll look at other commands of HDFS in detail. Thank you so much for watching this video.